This year's Bard Music Festival is different from previous music festivals on several accounts. First, we are focusing on a composer from Italy. We've never really had an Italian composer. And that's odd when you think that Italy, in the European arena, rivals Germany as the leading source of musical culture. The opera was born in Italy, essentially, and from the Italian Renaissance down, things Italian defined what was musical. For a man, let's say, in Mozart's generation, the Italian defined the highest musical achievement. The most popular art form in Italy was the opera. It was really, every town had an opera house. And it was what we would say today would be the movies, or television, or Amazon or Netflix series. It was the meeting ground not only of the elite, but of a rising middle class and even working class. So Verdi's tunes became popular tunes. There was not this kind of separation that we have now between popular music on one hand and so-called art, concert, operatic music. So Puccini came in a generation of a lot of young talent in Italy. So the first thing we're going to look at is the young Puccini and that generation of talent. It includes people like Mascagni. And Mascagni is particularly important because his opera Cavalleria Rusticana was kind of the first and most successful opera in something we call verismo, which is taking the life of ordinary people and presenting it on stage. So the opera wasn't about kings and queens or historical figures or mythic figures, but ordinary people and their struggles with life. And that was followed by another contemporary of Puccini's, Leoncavallo, with a very famous opera, Pagliacci. And these conquered Northern Europe, all of Europe, and America, and South America, where there was a huge appetite for opera. So the festival opens up with looking at an early symphonic work of Puccini's and the work of these other composers, plus a very rare semi-stage performance of the first success that Puccini had in an opera called Le Villi. And we also then show the last act of the really big success that he had, which launched his fame and his career, the opera Manosescu. So we follow then Puccini through his life. He dies in the 20s, but he then goes on from Manosescu to a series of successes, Tosca, La Bohème, and finally Butterfly in 1904, which in its first version was a failure and then quickly revised and became a hit. And then we follow his career as he begins to think about the shortcomings of his own craft and achievement. He had really succeeded in meeting the popular taste of the opera audience, but he was also accused of somewhat superficiality, of a kind of, how would I say, easy listening with a kind of simplified depiction of love and death and loss. So there was a suspicion that it was simply light entertainment, a kind of crossover between grand opera and operetta. And Puccini actually tried his hand at operetta in La Rondine around the time of the World War I. Puccini ends up, ironically, being the end of the operatic era. He is the last opera composer to command a worldwide audience. He and Richard Strauss in Germany, they're the last of the two exponents of the operatic form, who actually, Puccini more than Strauss, enter the mass public, Puccini above all. So Puccini is the inspiration for Rent. Madame Butterfly has been adapted many times for popular films. And Puccini's incredible success internationally was a tribute to his skill and his genius, but also it made him the subject of enormous controversy in Italy. So he was attacked by Italian nationalists as being an internationalist, ironically, because we think of him as quintessentially Italian. And so we look at the controversies that have surrounded Puccini, and as we look at his work and that of his contemporaries. He also lived through a period where people became very concerned about what should music be like in the modern era. With the First World War, the sort of sentimental, romantic, melodic material was considered somehow at odds with the harshness of industry, the dirt and poverty of cities, the violence of World War I, the machinery and technology of modernity. And there was a futurist movement in Italy which challenged tradition. And they had a kind of scandal concert in Milan in 1914. And we look at how this connects to Puccini and his ambitions and career. But his personal life has been investigated increasingly as a kind of way of understanding these operas. Now, I'm not sure that works entirely, but I think Puccini experts or people who love Puccini will find that the story of Puccini, both personally and as a great artist and a great composer, is not so simple as they think. Despite all the criticism that's been leveled at them, these are magical, triumphant emblems of what musical and theatrical imagination can provide. They're ravishingly beautiful and entirely engaging and mesmerizing. And they are tearjerkers. They get to you. He had an unerring sense of how to use music and drama to reach the audience. Now, critics will say, to what end? I mean, what's left when the curtain falls? What's left? How provocative or profound are they? But I think they will find that the craft of the composer is incredibly elaborate and sophisticated and just brilliant. And so one will encounter a much more complicated and varied a figure than people imagine. And they will have an ability to contextualize him in a world that has been treated with silence. And that's the musical world around Puccini.